Hi, my name is Roshan,
Hi, I'm Ray.
and today we'll be talking about traveling while on the sex offender registry. Um, so normally with the registry, before you go to from city to city, depending on how long you will stay in a city, you would have to actually report. You'll have to tell the city you coming from. So, for example, if I'm coming from Houston, say to Austin, I will have to let my officer know in Houston that I'm about to travel to Austin. I will have to tell them where I'm staying. I will have to tell them how long I'll be there. But when I get to Austin, I will have to also go report and check in Austin if it's after a certain amount of days. Um, and before you leave Austin to come back home, you would also have to check back in to Austin and tell them that you are leaving and you're headed back to Houston, Texas, um, which is a lot of work. Um,
It is a lot. Like most people just don't have that to deal with. I mean, you think about a normal person who isn't on a registry and has a different type of felony, let's say. Let's say they have car theft or something, they don't have to go through none of that.
right. And I mean, it just like the traveling process. It's very. I'm trying to figure out the word um, to use, but it's like it seemed like a system that you can easily like fumble the ball, or drop. It's like, especially if, for example, if you are, say, riding a bus. If you riding a bus and you're gonna be in a city, say 7 days, right? It seemed like in those 7 days, whatever you're going out of town for, if you're going to see family, you basically spending maybe 3 days just dealing with the registry, trying to make sure that you report here in Houston. You got to take the day in Houston to let them know everything that you're doing, which is time consuming. You go all the way to Austin. You got to go find wherever you have to register and report to there. And this is not no, I walk in the door and walk right back out the door type of deal. This is like you walk in somebody's office and you sit here like you could be there for a whole hour or a couple hours. Like I've been sitting in a registration office before for like hours. Like I think the longest I've sat in a registration office probably been like 3 hours. You know,
And
um,
that's for like, and just to put in perspective, when you go to the registry office, that's typically like for your annual check-in where you have to, is that mainly the reason why you would go to check in, basically outside of just, if you want to travel, so I know, what are you, I believe you have like a annual registry requirement.
yeah,
And so when you go to the office for that particular process, you might be sitting there, you have to basically craft your day around it because you might be there a while. So imagine if you have to go through that process every time you want to take a vacation, every time you want to visit family, every time someone dies, and it's out of state or across, let's say you're an immigrant, you might have family out the country, you know, it just a lot. And when you think about a word that comes to mind, I guess tedious is the word. It's very tedious. You know, it's like you said, they have so many levers that need to be pulled in order for you to be compliant. And it's so easy to fall out of compliance because if you were a person with no offense, or any other offense other than one that requires you to register on sex offender registry, you wouldn't have that to even think about.
Right.
So
You know, not to interrupt you, right? But I'm sitting up here thinking like like, and you brought up something good. Family emergencies or just an emergency in general where you have to move, you know, quick, right? Like, or you know what? Let's go to New Orleans when they had the hurricane, right? They had a hurricane. I have no idea what happened to the systems and how, the registry like took place or how they even handled the registry. But like I do wonder, like when it came to travel, since it is so easy to get in trouble, trying to make sure you stay in compliance because there's so many different rules that you have to remember. Like when it came to traveling from the hurricane, do you know how did that even work?
you have to really look back at what the technologies were back then. I mean, we still had we were just kind of coming into fast internet. So, I mean, they might have had a lot of things filed on paper. And, I definitely believe that they had a process in order. Now, how compliant, like how strictly adherent they were to that process, because, I mean, New Orleans and Houston is a good example of places where you're always susceptible. Right now, you look at a place like Houston, the climate is ever changing and you may have to evacuate because, we have flash flooding. You might have a situation where you don't have to leave the city, but you have to evacuate your residence because it's not inhabitable, but that's a whole nother conversation. But back to travel, yeah, I mean, I imagine that, at some point, they had to find the people. I don't think they just fell off the grid, but I don't know if there was any, penalties for compliance for that. That's a good question. It would be good to talk to someone if anybody had that experience out there, who actually was in the system that far back.
Right. And just to think of like traveling during an emergency like Katrina, right? I'm wondering like when was it okay to travel without getting in trouble? Like when do you know that it's okay for me to evacuate because like my life is actually on the line, right? Like I could be sitting up here depending on my resources would depend on how I can move and when. Like our resource levels is different. Like some people, they can literally just jump in the car and pull off whenever they want, they can travel to a whole nother state, but everybody don't have those options. So like traveling in the middle of an emergency, like when would it be okay for me to hop on this bus that's leaving from New Orleans in the middle of a disaster to head to another city, wherever the bus is evacuating to, without getting in trouble?
I guess at that point, you have to kind of look at it from a survivalist standpoint because, once the local authorities declare a mandatory evacuation emergency, I would assume that, all resources, including police officers that would otherwise be responsible for monitoring said individuals would all be basically tied up in first responder situations. So I would say if I was in that situation, once they say everybody get the F out of Dodge, this thing is coming hard, I would say, at that point, the authorities should relieve you of any responsibility of checking in and monitoring, because at that point, who are you going to check in and monitoring for? Who are you going to check in with? Because the offices are closed, everybody's hunkering down or, you know, going as far away as they can. So, that's worst case scenario. I think it's pretty cut and dry because if I'm not mistaken, um, here in Houston, Harris County, we had a similar disaster in Hurricane Ike. Maybe not to the level of Katrina, but I could remember having to leave, you know, people having to leave, for days, weeks at a time because there was no power. The gasoline was a shortage because they couldn't get the gas pumps filled up quick enough. It was a tough time to be a Texan living here during Hurricane Ike. And I'm sure, they're basically, you know, some leniency in cases where, a person had to flee for their life, you know. But, for just leisure, I mean, just like family reunions and stuff, I mean, it shouldn't take a disaster for you to have to be okay with leaving
Right.
freely. We talk about that, and that's a good point to make, but it shouldn't take that much for you to just be free. I mean, honestly, I don't think a lot of the protocols they have are even useful in public safety, if you ask me. It's just
I
a
agree.
public pain in the ass for people who are just trying to move on with their life. And it really, if you want to go even deeper, to me, it's kind of like a lifetime probation period that you never end. I mean, any other person that's on paper for said crime can complete that sentence, discharge, and they're free. There's no more restrictions. But with this particular uh, theater of crime that they put in the system, it's like it's a completely different ball game
Right.
because if you discharge any other sentence, you're free. That's it. You don't have to register, you don't check in, nothing like that. With it basically goes against your constitutional right of double jeopardy, where they can charge you for the same crime twice.
Over and over.
Over and over, really.
Hmm. So I do want to
So
make a
it's
comment.
unconstitutional to
Oh,
me, first.
what happened?
I just wanted to say that, it's unconstitutional to me.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Um, but I do want to respond to evacuating. Like you said, it shouldn't have to be an emergency before we can actually like leave the state without all the repercussions, right? But I can recall, and not only, from a personal standpoint, just knowing people on probation and parole to where they were told, you better not leave or go anywhere. You better stay right there. Like when it came to evacuating, like because everybody look at the evacuation mandates differently. Like some people, you know, like when it start getting to certain levels, you know how they start going through the yellow and the orange and the red, like, get out of here. Like some people, they look and they say, you know what, I need to go now. And yet, for that order you was talking about, when they say go, it should be okay. But sometime when people say go, it's too late. Like like sometime when people actually say go, the time that they say go, most of the people had already evacuated. Even a lot of the authorities, they gone already. And the only people left behind is the people without resources. So they sitting here now when people say go, and now they trying to figure out how to go, but the resources to get out is limited, and and I'm sitting back and I'm gonna go back to Katrina, right? When that hurricane,
But there was one
um,
after Katrina that was pretty bad too.
well, but for Katrina though, I can tell you that a whole lot of people that was incarcerated in jail actually died because when they said go, the guards, the authorities, the people with the keys had already gone. Like everybody was gone. So the people in jail drowned and they died. And there was nobody there to let them go. and they was stuck, no resources, all by themselves inside of the county jail. You know,
I actually saw a documentary explaining that exact thing. It was like only about a 30-minute documentary. It was detailing the horrors of the Orleans Parish prison right there. I used to walk past that prison. I'm from New Orleans, for anybody that doesn't know. So I actually, did have to evacuate. Thankfully, me and my family got out in time. But for this particular instance, I do recall that prison, which was right in the heart of downtown, and they had basically had said, I think the sheriff said, we're going to keep our prisoners where they belong, and he said that publicly. And there was actually a moment where, if you look at the press conference, the mayor was in the background when the sheriff said that, and the mayor had a look on his face like, oh wow, I guess we are, like he didn't even believe that that was going to be their stance. And so
he ain't speak up on it either, or speak out, or correct the sheriff, or make sure that something differently happened than what that sheriff said either.
yeah, well, that was Mayor Ray Nagin, and you asked the people in New Orleans, yeah, he wasn't popular.
Yeah. And then just thinking of traveling while on the registry, like with international travel, now I do know that some people, well, so the passport, do you know that they actually make your passport different? So when you go out to other countries, they actually can tell that you are on a registry, which to me seems like a setup. Like, I applied for a passport. It was not going to be a regular passport like everybody else's passport. um, I did feel some kind of way about the passport because I felt like if I go out the country with a passport that has a label or some kind of stigma that comes with it, that I could be an easy target for um, extortion outside the country, to where, like, they can pretty much, and it's all, it's just my belief system because of how men and women are, how devious they are, like, just to think that somebody can actually like get wind of a label or a title that I carry, that they have no idea how I got it, to extort me for money, because of this charge, and there's nothing I can do about it. And if I didn't have the financial resources to pay people in another country, then I can be jailed or prisoned, and nobody would care except the people that actually know me, because the first thing that anybody would want to run to and say or talk about in a defense as to why I'm in a position that I'm in is because of a sex offender status. And it's scary.
So yeah, I mean, in having this conversation, what it really shows to me is that, in this country, when we say, we're a free country, but freedom ain't free. And I say that to say that you can regain some of your privileges, after having, discharged your sentence and everything. But, from sitting from here, it appears that, you're still always going to have something. And it's not like a regular offender who, a regular ex offender. Let's just take the S off. Let's just say an ex offender of any other nature, can discharge their sentence, and if they want to take, a road trip to Canada, that's their prerogative. They want to go on a world tour, they can do that. I believe there's celebrities like Mike Tyson and people like that who have to register because of a charge that they got, early in life or later on in their careers. But they're celebrities, so they all obviously have resources, to make sure that they're gonna be all right wherever they go.
Mike
Um,
Tyson, Pee Wee Herman, Tupac. Well, he gone now, but keep going.
Jeff Epstein, the big fish, that was the big one right there. But I mean, he had his own island, you know.
Hmm.
So, I mean, the label really carries as much weight, I think, as your social status in this society. In other words, people like us, who come from, modest working class backgrounds, when we're faced with all of these stipulations, it's the type of stuff that make you say, well, hell, I don't want to do all of that. And you could either go one of two ways about it. You can buck the system and live your life and just try to hope that, nobody's trying to be an a-hole that day. Or you can, try to live, by the letter, you know, under every stipulation that is put forth to you. And, at least you'll have a clear conscience in the sense of knowing that the authorities can't come for you. But, either one of those options just don't seem like a good one. You know, it's like a lesser of two evils. And
Yeah,
it makes a person who otherwise is a law-abiding citizen think otherwise about what it means to abide by the law, because you have to basically, you're governed by a totally different standard of laws than every other citizen.
yeah, yeah. It's every additional rule and stipulation becomes a financial burden for people with less resources. I mean, even just to think about checking in, before you go out of town, you have to have money or bus fare to actually get to the registration office and back. And then when you get out of town, you have to also pay for gas. If not, pay for Lyft or Uber or bus fare to get to the registration office and back if you don't have somebody driving you around. But I know most people say, well, if you're going out of town, then you ought to have some money anyway. But again, like as to the reason you going out of town, sometimes it could be an emergency. And sometimes, or if it's not an emergency, sometimes we wish to enjoy something with what little we have. So therefore, like my out of town trip may not be like somebody else's out of town trip who got a little bit more resources and can move around however they want to move around and do whatever they want to do, and it's all good. But every rule, every additional stipulation that we have to go through, it costs. Like we have to pay to follow rules, um, which adds to some of the problems that we have. But what do you ultimately think about the registration traveling guidelines? I mean, like, is it safety? Is this a preventative measure to, you know, create a safe environment for those that we may encounter, or from those that, we may meet in a new city, or from those that, live in our neighborhood in a city that we reside in? Like, what do you think about the traveling restrictions? Safety or no safety? Purposeful, not purposeful? Do we need it? Do we not need it?
As far as I'm concerned, I don't think it's purposeful. I think if we are going by a nation of laws and a constitution where people have the right to the pursuit of happiness, if you break a law of the land and you've done your time, you've been adjudicated, paid your debt to society, once you sign a paperwork that say you have discharged from your sentence of that crime, there should be no further penalties for doing anything other than breaking another law. And when I say breaking another law, I mean a violent law or something of clear malicious intent. But other than that, you basically can live your life by the standard of any other person who's been adjudicated and wants to move on with their life. No
But thank
extra
you.
restrictions.
I dig that. I dig it. I'm with you 100%. But thank you, Ray. And until next time.
Till next time, I want to say, don't conform to the system, change the system. Thank
I'm
you,
with
Ro.
that. Absolutely.